So in the lessons in logic, yes, the last time we spoke about this, we talked about the law of non-contradiction, which is attributed to Aristotle, one of the great philosophers. There's three philosophers that are called we could call them the big three. We have Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates was a teacher to Plato, and Plato taught Aristotle, and Aristotle was actually one of the tutors of Alexander the Great. And these philosophers, I don't know how much impact they had on what the impact was that one had on the other. However, I do know that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are some of the biggest, the biggest set of philosophers that you would ever hear about. And Socrates is known for one of his famous quotes, which is an unexamined life is not worth believing. That's what Socrates said. And that's an interesting quote. If you really think about it, he says, an unexamined life is not worth living. Now, Plato is known for a book he called The Republic, and he's known for many other things. We're not going to talk about Plato now. We're going to talk more about Aristotle. But there's one thing Plato also mentioned with the idea of what is knowledge, or knowing, the idea of knowledge. And knowledge is justified true belief. I believe that's attributed to Plato. And Aristotle is the one whose law we call the law of non-contradiction, which is from his kind of explaining how something cannot be and also be the negative of what is at the same time. So P and negative P cannot both be true at the same time in the same context. That's what the law of non-contradiction basically says. I cannot be holding a pen right now and also not be holding a pen right now at the same time in the same context. It's either true that I'm holding a pen right now or I'm not holding a pen right now. But to say that I'm holding a pen right now and also not holding a pen right now would be a contradiction, because one is the negative of the other. And so a proposition and the negation of the proposition cannot both be true. And this can be shown in a truth table. One of the ways that logicians do this is they would have a table where they have P and Q, and on this table we have true, false, and then true, false, false. So we're going to call P. P will essentially be a statement saying that Amos is holding a pen right now. And when I put negative P, what it means is that Amos is not holding a pen right now. Well, let me look for another example that goes beyond just a time frame. To say that Amos never existed would be negative P. Therefore, when we say P, what we mean by P is that Amos has existed one time or the other in history. And so if Amos has existed and that's true, then Amos not existing cannot be also true at the same time in the same context. If P is true, negative P cannot be true, because that would be negating P. And so we could use the truth table to show us how P and negative P will result in a system where it's false, because if P is true and negative P is false, both of them are not true, therefore our overall outcome will be false. We can talk about this in more detail, but I just wanted to begin to see the picture of what the law of non-contradiction does. Now, what I want to introduce today is an argument called deductive arguments, or a type of arguments that are called deductive arguments. Deductive arguments typically would have premises and a conclusion. If the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. Let me explain. If I was to tell you that everyone who studies chemistry is cool, Amos studied chemistry, then the conclusion will ultimately have to be Amos is cool. What does this mean? What does that mean? We label it typically 1, 2, 3. We have two premises, so everyone who studies chemistry is cool. Then we say somebody who studied chemistry, we give a name, maybe Amos or maybe Robert Boyle or something. We would say that that person essentially studied chemistry, and since everyone who studied chemistry is cool, and this person studied chemistry, that makes this person cool. What we need to remember is that if the premises are true, the conclusion is true. And that's what deductive arguments deal with. Now, inductive statements or inductive arguments typically would be with things that are justified on the basis of what has happened in the past. So for example, the sun rose, or the sun came up yesterday, so the sun will come up again today. Now I'm using inductive reasoning based on what has happened in the past. But when we talk about deductive reasoning, the argument itself can be valid. And if the argument is valid, that doesn't necessarily mean that the argument is true. It only means that the argument within itself is internally consistent and valid. However, whenever we want to talk about if an argument is true, now we have to introduce the reality factor. Does the argument match up with reality? If it does, then that argument is true. So is it true that everyone who studies chemistry is cool? That's a different topic. Now we have to go and look and see if that's really the case. However, within this argument, everyone who studies chemistry is cool. Amos studied chemistry, therefore Amos is cool. That argument is valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the argument is true. An argument can be valid, but not true. And we have to remember that. And that's where we'll stop with the law of or deductive arguments, and I hope that this is beginning to help you see what logicians do and what logic does. Logic helps you to make more reasonable and logical arguments, and I hope that you learn to use these tools as we go on.